the defensive backs. And, of course, we've got Rick Saratella on the line from the NFL Draft Bible, and you can catch the audio versions if you're listening for those on Google Play, Stitcher, Podbean, and iTunes at MarkRogersTV. And, of course, subscribe to my YouTube channel. And, of course, you got 4 weeks to get ready for the big weekend. You go to the NFLDraftBible.com. Corners and safeties, this is always my favorite position when it comes to freakish athletes, and maybe the most difficult position on the field, cornerback in the NFL.
Yeah, and, this year, 70 defensive backs invited to Indianapolis at the NFL Scouting Combine. I believe 35 corners were selected in the draft, just corners last year alone. And I think you're going to continue to see that trend grow. A lot of teams valuing that slot corner that as a starter. That third cornerback position is now valued as a starter by a lot of NFL teams with 70% plus passing attack. So to me, the three guys that have a potential top 10 overall consideration: Minkah Fitzpatrick from Alabama, Denzel Ward from Ohio State, and Derwin James from Florida State. Now, James, he did get some criticism for kind of underachieving this past year, but then I think he went out to the combine and showed you what a thoroughbred athlete looks like. Denzel Ward, I think somebody throughout the process said, listen, if this guy is not in your top 10 overall picks, just, rip up the mock draft and start all over again. And there's a lot of talk between, do teams value him or Minkah Fitzpatrick more? For me, I like the jackknife Minkah. He's played so many different positions, I think 6 different spots on the field. To me, he's a chess piece. I like him as my top defensive back in this year's draft. And then you talked about the stud athletes, Jair Alexander from Louisville. I mean, this guy came out and proved that he belongs in the first round. Carlton Davis from Auburn. I think here's a guy that some people might be surprised, or I'm not seeing him mocked in the first round of a lot of drafts, but I think he brings the size, the athleticism, 6'1". A lot of these corners now, too, bringing that size as we evolve, especially in the last 5 years. I used to be able to count on one hand how many 6-foot cornerbacks ran 4.4. Now, you've got dozens of guys that do that every year. Mike Hughes from UCF. People debate whether or not he's going to be an inside or outside corner at the next level. Dante Jackson, who we talked about briefly, his teammate, DJ Chark on the offensive side. Dante Jackson, kind of a similar prospect to Adoree Jackson coming out last year as a return guy, could do some things there. Isaiah Oliver from Colorado, Joshua Jackson from Iowa, ironically, is kind of sliding down the board after his combine performance. And it just goes to show you these little checkmark boxes as you go throughout the draft process that the teams want to see. It can affect your draft stock somewhat because Josh Jackson maybe went to a late first rounder to a mid second rounder. I think we saw the Iowa kid last year, Desmond King, slide because of that as well. And then Ronnie Harrison from Alabama. I love his film. I think this guy is a pretty solid player. He's not an elite player, but I would have no problem using a first round pick on him. Justin Reed from Stanford, I think, is also in that top 40 overall conversation. And then, the forgotten man from Florida, Duke Dawson. I mean, this guy, you talk about Fitzpatrick playing multiple positions. Duke Dawson, I think, is a guy at the next level that, could play various roles, great athlete, tremendous collegiate player, and could wind up going day 2, day 3 just because of the depth of this year's defensive back class.
Yeah, so for those that watch college football, that watch my channel, you're watching your team and then you're picking out the big games, and then the rest of it's you're catching highlights. And when do defensive backs make the highlights? Well, they make the highlights if you're really watching when they give up big touchdowns. But basically, if you're just watching the highlights, you're looking for interceptions and pick sixes. So who knows about Joshua Jackson? Everybody knows about him because he was always making those kind of plays. Well, those kind of plays, if they're done over and over and over, maybe there's a trend there. Maybe there's something about this kid that he's got good ball skills, instincts, all those sorts of things. But if it's sporadic, then maybe it's just by chance he's in the right place at the right time. Joshua Jackson did it so much at Iowa. You're talking about 3 interceptions against Ohio State. You're talking about 2 pick sixes against Wisconsin that kept Iowa being dominated in the game into the fourth quarter. So it'll be interesting to see how he transitions. The other thing I've got for you, Rick, is there's a lot of play given in the media, even by analysts that know what they're talking about when they talk about, so for example, Denzel Ward. We know what the string of corners and safety play has been at Ohio State. He's being compared to Marshawn Lattimore from the standpoint of plug and play, Pro Bowl player his first year. And if there's a connection between scouts really thinking, maybe the deciding factor being, okay, we got to go through all the measurables and look at the tape, but man, this kid comes from Ohio State, and traditionally Ohio State, LSU, Florida, when it comes to defensive backs, you almost can't go wrong. Is there any truth to that, do you think?
Well, I mean, I think it definitely has to cross your mind because it's human nature, right? And for a while there was talk about the Alabama corners didn't have great footwork because that wasn't something that Saban focused on. So I think throughout the years and the coaching trends kind of tendency quarterbacks. I mean, that could be another area that we debate. For a while they had a bad label. So how does that factor in with Sam Darnold? I don't think very much. But when you're talking Ohio State corners, Ohio State linebackers, like you said earlier in the show, I mean, these guys have backups that didn't really see a lot of playing time, but they're higher rated prospects than some of these guys that have started for the past 3 or 4 seasons for other programs.
Rick Saratella from the NFL Draft Bible setting us up for the big weekend in 4 weeks, offense and defense. And Rick, I'll just generally hit you with this. Who would be the best kicker, punter, anybody in that list of 2 or 3 that will come off the board at some point, 4th or 5th round, probably?
Yeah, I think Daniel Carlson and J.K. Scott are really the 2 top guys that we have on our board. And when it comes to the kickers, I like highlighting some of the under the radar guys. There's a guy working out today. I know this is going to be released at a later date from Monmouth University, Matt White. He's a guy that, can kick, can punt, has tremendous hang time. So Charlotte punter, Arthur Hart, he's a guy I had a chance to speak with. If he makes it, he'll be the 4th deaf player in NFL history, and he actually came on my podcast show and had the plugins for the ears, so he was able to hear me and actually come on my show. So the first interview I conducted with a deaf player. So he's an interesting story. And Cannon Rooker, an under the radar ECU kicker, I believe, that just came across my desk that I've been studying up on as well. So we delve into the special teams and but yeah, I think the guys invited to the All-Star games there at the Senior Bowl, those are probably your top tier prospects at that position.
That's amazing stuff right there. When you get that kind of opportunity, and the young man has his opportunity to make it to the NFL in the biggest stage with those type of challenges. So you see what kind of coverage Rick supplies at the NFL Draft Bible. All sorts of video, all sorts of interviews. The podcast is there. You see a ton of information, of course, because that's what the NFL draft is, just information prepping toward the big weekend. In addition to that, Rick's all over it. He went to the combine. He goes all over the place. He's on the East Coast, running all over the place, catching workouts and so forth as well. So it's just a ton of great stuff there at the NFL Draft Bible. Rick, we appreciate you stopping by. Know you have a ton going on and that you made time for us.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And you summarized it beautifully. I think it was Bill Polian who said that every year 28,000 college players graduate and are eligible for the NFL draft. We try to consolidate it down to a top 1,000 final ranking up on the NFLDraftBible.com when it's all said and done. So appreciate the platform as always, Mark.